going to install and update, like you say, later.
Okay. Let me start the meeting since we don't have a chairperson yet. This is our first meeting of the year. So, Allison, are you ready?
Yep, all set.
All right, I'll call this meeting to order. Roll call.
Commissioner Robbins,
Here.
Commissioner Sudas Little,
Here.
All right. We'll do the pledge of allegiance. And we'll get the starts.
Okay, spot. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And since this is our first meeting of 2022, we need to elect the chairperson. So I'll open the floor for nominations.
Oh,
I think I recognize Mr. Robbins first, so I'll let you go first. Go ahead. You nominate who? Patricia. Oh, is there a second to that motion?
Second it.
All those in favor of Patricia being our chairperson, say aye. Aye. The people have spoken, Patricia.
Well, there's not a lot to do with it.
The people have spoken. You are the chairperson, so it's your meeting.
You know, I've been ducking this shared business for quite some time.
Rick's power persuasion.
This is next. Okay, well,
You have
let's
agenda?
start with the agenda. Okay. We did our call to order and our roll call and our pledge of allegiance, and we elected me. So approval of minutes, are there any changes? I didn't have any work to do from
What's that? Oh,
the
yeah.
2021 meeting.
I make a motion to approve the minutes of June 24th, 2021.
I will second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
And all opposed, so the minutes are approved. And next, we need an approval of the agenda. Since we don't have any additions, or do we?
Yes, we had a construction board of appeals meeting this morning, so Tammy can just keep me updated.
Sure, we have.
Well, we're just doing the general.
Oh, we didn't want to put it on there. Okay.
We can put it at number 4. Or at the beginning, where you.
The first one. No,
There.
I'm taking your agenda, I'm taking your pen. And
So that
then,
means
what was it?
It is a construction code board of appeals. Only 30 years.
I was going to say, wow.
But it's some argument position.
Okay, so can I have a motion to approve the agenda as amended?
I make a motion to approve the agenda
As amended with construction code board of appeals.
for the construction board of appeals.
And I'll second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, so we have an agenda, so we're ready to move on to our discussion items.
Public comment.
Where's public comment? I did step right by you, Sam.
Sam's
Public
here.
comment.
Is there any reason for me to do public comment?
No, you can come join us during the discussion. So, and there's no one else in the room.
No public comment. So now we'll move to our discussion items. And our first action item is a 2022 budget review. Amber.
So I did give you guys a copy of the May summary report, which shows where we're at as of May.
Looks like things are not so still there.
We're still very busy. We've got a lot of permits coming in. There's a lot of discussion of commercial projects in our pipe. And then there was another project. You guys received a presentation yesterday about the project in the city, so that's what everybody wants to do.
We want to see it too.
Yeah, I haven't heard anything more on that, but yes, that's,
I see them out there working with the land,
yeah.
And what are they doing there?
building up to how many homes?
I think there's, I want to say between 20 and 30.
Yeah,
That's 32.
Yeah, is there some houses and some?
Duplexes and triplexes.
It's kind of that circle, that circle in the middle is what they needed.
Yeah. They're working on, I think, on a bridge right now.
Is this an affordable or?
No, it's not the tied in, it's just a plan. But this is the first new house that we've been in Cedar in 60 years.
That's in the village.
That's in the village, yeah.
There's also building going on, Cedar, continue down the road right at 72, but I think that's just a orchard, some vineyard or something. Because they've been doing clearing all for the last couple of months, but I see plants in there.
Yeah, I haven't heard anything.
Trey was telling us there's still getting a lot of demand for new addresses, which is inside the city, new houses, new addresses. What's the last one now?
No, at some point in time, I'm going to look at
So they're keeping up with the inspections and everything?
Inspections are keeping up with plan reviews coming along. We're a bit further behind plan review. We'd like to be, with hiring new folks, we're still going through training, so I'm still doing a lot of stuff that I would have handed off to someone. So we're still working
So
on
do we ever get the Klaus happy?
No, but he never appealed, never, he
That's
just.
so long ago now that I'm in this
Oh,
one.
no, he came, I give him credit, he came in all the process, but, he just, he wanted special treatment. He wanted to be treated different than everybody else. Can't do that.
And since we did talk about that, we've had a lot of circumstances that further backed up the reason for why we do it the way we do it. There are a lot of lawsuits going on in the townships right now that we would also be involved in if we didn't require permits from ADD to address that.
But he, I mean, it was a gracious presentation, he was very professional, we gave him nothing to speak, he did. And so I do have issues with that.
The Cedar project doesn't have any incentive, any relationship with brownfield, there's no brownfield collector or anything associated with that.
No, it's strictly a private, plastic construction. He's not actually wrong.
Okay, so, well, this is really,
And your quote staff, and hopefully, you're pretty stable on this little changes.
I mean, when you talk to the contractors, yeah, everybody's talking about the price of materials still up and everything, but they're still going like 2-3 years.
But because of your staff,
Yeah, we're fully staffed.
you don't expect the changes.
are you hearing that there's continuing supply chain issues for those things?
You know, when it finally comes in, it's broken, then we do a legal process over again.
So since I'm here, we only have one mechanic goes, but,
Yes, he's always listed one inspector as well.
So you're really doing very, very well. And you're too busy.
I did want to talk about, I don't know if this is the time to do it or if you want to do it later, but we did talk about in the last meeting, kind of creating a revolving fund for
Yeah, let's wait, because Sam's on time crunch, so fairness to Sam.
Yep.
We can have a discussion after.
That's fine.
So is there anything, any other, any more on this?
That was just a
Yes,
question.
thank you so much. Sam, do you want to go?
Yes.
Madam Chair, then,
So we can talk about the appeal on the 10 fees.
so Andrew, you want to say some over, then, just, Sam, that.
Sure. So we have been requiring permits for temporary structures for seasonal use permits for 4 years now. The fee is a flat $175, that includes an inspection fee, base fee for the permit application, and the plan review fee. It is charged for a person across the board within whether they need to do this or not.
And I think there were some conditions and differences in terms of sizes of the homes.
Nope, straight across the board, any temporary structure, flat 175 feet.
So, Sam, did you like to?
So it's not necessarily great when we just sat through it. I'd like it, if you, do you want to explain the difference between the whole point of the board of appeals?
Yeah, I guess talk about that. The issues over igloos and whether permits are required or not. We're going to talk about the next, but that's doesn't relate to this. Because part of the code says if they're less than how many square feet?
120 square feet,
120 square feet and less than 10 occupants,
10 occupants.
they do not require a permit, which is the same issue for the appeal. However, there's another part of the code that talks about public safety. Council responsibility to enforce public safety. and if there's a potential threat to public safety, they do have the right to fire permits and inspections and so forth. So Amber made a decision to inspect igloos, and they meet the requirements for electrical and everything. And for outsiders, whether they're more than 10 or less than 10. And that was appealed in construction order 306 cycle Amber at the air required. Initially inspected for the safety.
Which was just decided this morning.
Yeah, that was this morning, so. But the fees are a separate issue. In construction code, by law, any decision Amber makes as a building official, I can't override, the board can't override it. It's a code of appeal, and that's our state law. So we went through the process. And we actually asked for the clarification. So Amber could decide on the report, because it was a new dimension that's in the code. And they're popping up, and some are large and some are small. So there really was, and we checked with legal counsel. Yes, the code does say that they're 100, if they're less than 10 or less than X square feet, they will need inspection. But there's a second code that talks about for the public safety, it doesn't have a size for the structure is, so there's a potential for public safety issue. They do have a right to ask for permit and inspection, and the trucking code, we were going to choose it this morning.
So I guess my question to you, Emma, is why did you feel that there was a public safety issue for igloos that were less than 10 occupants and smaller than 20 square feet?
The safety issues we're seeing, doesn't matter if you have 1 igloo, 10 igloos, 2 igloos, it's across the board. What do you see? We're seeing issues with egress, issues with electrical, mechanical,
Heaters.
heaters.
Do you have, what are your igloos?
We have electrical heaters, so we have an electrical fireplace, and we also have propane forced air, so the propane tank is outside, outside of the tent. I mean, if you don't mind, if I kind of step off to the side here for a second. So
We're a little off top of that, we're
Yeah.
by the construction code.
yeah,
No, I'm just trying to understand why, from Emma, why she would move in that direction. You know, if you're seeing this, is this a high incidence? If you're seeing this, is 1 or 2?
You know, there's several throughout the county. That's why we do it every year. It's the same igloo that goes up, that argument is true, but the same issues are prevalent. Fire extinguishers, electrical cords, mechanical, we're looking at the same issues every time that igloo goes up.
And there's an
You're
issue
having
statewide.
Problems with it, not just 1 or 2 isolated. You know, are there numbers in terms of?
Every time they come out, there's maybe 2 that don't have any issues out of the 8 total applicants we have. So it's pretty consistent.
So regardless, I mean, it was decided this morning that they do indeed require this permit. Which, you know, that was great. That was, when I brought up the point to the building department in regards to why I didn't think our igloos were required, they sent me back the temporary structure language. So then after reading it, I said, well, indeed, like I shouldn't be under these stipulations because of these 2. So we went through the process, that was ruled out. I think at this point, because of the ruling this morning, which, you know, is what it is from our perspective, I think the issue in terms of the fees, because now it's clear that the building department has decided that, would be in regards to the penalties we were assessed, because we did put up both tents. So it's 175 per location, or
Per tent, like you're talking about your tents, you get the 1 tent free, because you got a choice. Igloos, we did not do that, because they're a different
so it's
process.
but it's $175 per owner, would be my understanding, per permit. Okay. So now I'm under, you know, because of this clarification, what happened is we put up igloos on both of our locations, Aurora and Good Harbor. We received cease and desist because we had not filed a permit, which I didn't know that we needed to for those. And then a week later, we received total 650 out of pocket, so whatever the balance for the penalties were. So I guess at this point, because of this morning's meeting, I would ask that we're returned the penalty fees. I think a week after the fact is a little aggressive in terms of compliance. You know, we're a small business. We're not here to, you know, snap on the dime, because the government doesn't work that quick either. I think it's irrational to have a week turnaround on compliance and things like that, that clearly needed to be sorted out anyway with the Board of Appeals.
Yeah, just so clarification, the construction code has authority over those type of issues. The fees are set by the board of commissioners. So that's why they're having this meeting, same day as the meeting this morning. So there's two separate issues. The issues on the permits will require not just decided by the Board of Appeals. There's a separate could appeal, there's a state board of appeal that will be the next step. So that process is done. This is about the fees, which is controlled by the board of commissioners. So that's why this is Rick's first meeting, so explain what his role is here.
So, okay, so basically, you were just simply looking for penalty.
I mean, at first I was asking, because because of the way that the language reads, I still think that the temporary structure exempts these, but because of this morning's reading, I'm just asking for the things back for the penalties on it, because clearly the building department needed clarity on the issue as well. So
So the total amount to pay was
$650, I believe.
and the fee is
It's
$175.
175. If you look, I included a handout here that details the communication between us and Sam in both of these issues. When he was notified that permits were required, Sam, there's a copy there.
Yeah, just walk through the book.
Yep, so this second page details when we sent the first violation notice, when we talked to him, and then when we received the application.
For the minutes, we leave out the dates.
Yep, so the first violation notice was sent for the property on East Horn Road on November 9th, 2021. And we give people 14 days notice, as was indicated in that first letter, when they need to respond. Per the county-approved policy, there is notice in the letter that they may be assessed an additional after-the-fact fee for work that's been found to have knowingly and intentionally proceeded without the required permits. So as time went by, Sam did not communicate with us any further on getting the required permits. And when he finally did apply, it was incomplete.
And what day is that?
That was the 3rd of December, December 3rd. He didn't have a land use, he didn't have site plan, and he hadn't sent the DEC.
It started on the 9th of November.
Correct.
Okay.
So when we got everything on the 3rd, it wasn't complete. It was sent back to him to get the rest of the information. By the time we got it, he stopped communicating again, and at that time, I did decide to charge the after-the-fact fee for this property. Okay, so the third paper here shows you the date the permit was issued. It was issued December 29th of 2021. That's when we finally got everything and were able to issue him the permit for the same property. When you go to the fourth page, that same day, the inspector was driving by and he noticed that they had igloos up on the other property on the Dancy Trail. So Sam is saying that the igloos were put up at the same time, but that was never disclosed to our department. When he didn't get the permit for this, at the same time it was disclosed to us that he had igloos up on another property. Immediately, he was going to have to pay the after-the-fact fee on top of the permit fee. And the reason for that is by that time, he did know he needed a permit. He did not disclose to our department. They had already put them up on the other location. And that's detailed on the 5th page here. The first day the letter went out on the 29th of December. Then we received communication on January 12th. We advised them that by the end of that day, if we didn't receive some kind of documentation, we were going to have to post the stop work order at the site. And there's a copy of the email that was sent to Taylor for that. And the last page here shows you the date that we got a permit and was able to issue it for the second location, it was January 18th.
So it isn't a permit per owner, it's a permit per location.
Yes.
That's not what I heard, I thought I was hearing.
Yeah, so per location, we give Sam a discount on the 10th because he has 2 properties that are adjacent to each other on Corn Road. So he gets a permit for free for the 10th. These 2 are not adjacent, so I cannot give that discount for this one.
Okay. So if you have 2, like if he had igloo 2 at Good Harbor, then there would have been a discount because they were adjacent.
No, he had igloos at both of the Aurora Sellers locations. They have the farm Reading location, and then the Hastings location. If he had igloos on both of those properties, they are adjoining properties.
for separate addresses and separate tax ID numbers, which would typically require 2 permits. And the second permit is discounted, so you would waive the fee on the second. You still would require 2 permits, but you would not have to pay the fee.
Because they're adjacent properties.
Correct. But it isn't just a fee per owner for putting up X number of igloos. It's a fee per igloo, per location. No, it's per property, so I've got more than the standard that does it with that hot rock. There's some fish handies down on a little Traverse Lake, so they don't pay per igloo, they pay per location, yes.
So he's being fined.
Because he did not hold a permit at the appropriate time, because he didn't, and he stopped communicating, and then at the second point, he knew he needed a permit. So he, according to the language we were approved by the board for, he knowingly and willfully continued to utilize it without obtaining proper permit.
Yeah, the only thing I have to say is, when we passed that ruling, it wasn't for something like this. It was for something major in a building, when someone was knowingly and willingly ignoring something that really caused a safety issue or a hazard. You know, not getting back in 2.5 weeks on an igloo issue, I don't, you know, obviously, Sam thought he had 1 permit for both locations, not, if I'm kind of following the conversation. You weren't sure you needed to file the second one, and you didn't know that you needed to file it at all because of looking at the code and doing your own due diligence.
There's clearly, I understand that in Amber's mind it was very black and white, but the fact that we even had to go through a meeting this morning to clarify should at least say something that it's not a black and white issue if these are required, because the building department itself had sent me a temporary structure, so the definition on which I was operating on. So as clear as black and white as it is in Amber's mind, that's not under the information that I was working under, because they sent me the definition which they were working under, so I'm working under a different set of assumptions.
And that's fair. I would also like to point out that we didn't question it until this spring when it came to the test. We did not question this or ask for any information.
I did question the gentleman, the inspector, on whether it was required or not. I didn't type it in an email, but.
Because I did not receive anything from you asking on it until the spring with the test.
And we have communicated with the inspectors back and forth, because I do believe that there have been inconsistent rulings. And we even talked about one this morning in regards to the inspectors and how they're regulating these tents. It has not been consistent. We've had the exact same tents. The igloos are different because this is a newer thing over the last couple of years for us. But we have had the exact same tents, for example, at Aurora, and had different inspectors give us completely different rulings on it. So I don't know that everything's been consistent. And when I question in regards to its need, I mean, clearly it was not as black and white as the building department took a position on it. So that's why I'm here.
So, you paid $650 total. The fee for the tent is
75.
and you're not debating that.
At this point, no, I mean, I don't agree
So
with what they
175.
said.
So the difference from 650 to 175 is that the late fee total?
Yeah, for the fact that it'd be the total of the 2 that were assessed each.
$300.
I was gonna say it's over 300. Is it $300 for that? Or?
150 to 150.
Oh, it's 150, okay. I was trying to figure out how you got to that number. So he paid, you assessed him 2 late fees of $150 each.
Yeah,
right?
1 for each property. Yes.
So basically the issue is $300, it's not $650.
At this point, no, I mean,
Yeah. So it's just $300 for late fees.
I don't understand the 2 violations. You got here one for November. You got one in December 29th last year. Or you're at June 15th. What's that procedure? When you give somebody a violation, you get a traffic ticket, you got 10 days to
Yep, you had 14 days to.
14 days, okay, that's it, okay. Did you contact anybody within 14 days? that
Within-
wanted to appeal it?
within I did not know that there was a 14-day appeal rule, honestly. And I was also gone a fair
That's
amount.
right here.
Is it in the number?
Yeah, it's right, and it's highlighted.
Correct, I did
And I'm
not,
trying to help you.
I'm not looking,
Yeah,
not looking for you, yeah.
Yeah.
it's-
But I mean, it's like, here we are 6 months later.
Well, it takes a lot, I mean, they had to schedule a Board of Appeals meeting in regards to, they even had the authority to regulate it in the
Did
first
you
place.
appeal these violations?
That's why we're here, I'm appealing, I appealed the
But I
violations
mean, you had 14
You
days.
did not appeal them at that time.
within 14 days, correct, I did not meet the 14-day requirement.
But he did bring them up, and, in full disclosures, Sam Simpson is in my district. And he did call me, and I did talk with Chad on 2 occasions. He talked with Amber.
And then we followed up on that with Sam.
I mean, I have
So
worked down the
he has
channel with
been-
us.
Yeah,
Um,
no, like Sam's a very gracious. We've been
Yeah,
sort
no,
of-
I'm trying to work
It's
on
not
it,
an
I'm just trying to understand since I'm new.
I think the conflict thing was the Hebrew factor, that we need to get clarification on which we did. It's a complicated clarification.
So, and I also, I work in the local government as well, and I try not to overreach. So first I worked through the channels. I was not receiving basically the response that I was, we were at disagreement. So then I started working up the channel, and that takes longer than 14 days in local government. So, I ended with Patricia because she represents my district. And it just takes a long time, and I was going for a decent amount this winter as well. So, business that goes on at that point, but we paid the fees. It's not like I withheld the capital. It was paid, but that's why I'm here now.
Yeah, and I think this is certainly a case of, there's a lot of differences of opinion as to whether or not it should fly. I think it's nice and good that the construction committee, whatever you call it, did make a decision today, so now going forward, there's clarity. But in the meantime, I think Sam got caught up in all of this, and I will come back to say that when we did pass this willful fine of 150, it was talked about in terms of contractors that were building on things that were not complying, that were, their non-compliance, going on, and it did put not only the project, but potentially people in jeopardy. I, and myself, never dreamed it would be used on something like this. And I would have a hard time supporting it. And, it's going to take another real hard look at that language that we approved, and this is how it looks.
But the simple question right now is the $300, that's what you're appealing. So I guess we need some
300
At this point, it's $300.
Yeah, he's agreed to pay the.
I mean, they ruled in, that is the ruling at this point.
So the only issue is twice successful, correct?
Correct.
Because you are willing to pay the 10 fee, I mean, that's not an issue.
I've already paid it.
Yeah. He actually paid the fee. This is appeal for the potential.
Right. Just reimbursed.
He is, so we asked Sam, pay the fee upfront, we told him about this process and that's what.
So when did you pay that fee?
Just, in the last.
These fees were paid back in December.
Let's get back to December, January.
Okay, what did you pay this, I'm sorry.
This, I paid for, so then I've resubmitted, because we have to submit tent permits twice a year. So I sent in my permit for the tents that we put up now for the season in April, and they were rejected, because I didn't pay the full fine, for it, and that was honestly just a clerical thing. So I've paid for that, in total.
Yeah, just recently, that's what I was thinking, so I thought you could just pay the late fee, but you paid.
I paid it.
Yeah, no, I think everybody was acting in good faith. I mean, Sam, with his knowledge and on the basis of what I understood, Amber, you were trying to do your job. I think it's a matter, I would feel more comfortable if we, I say this, whether it was something in my district or not, if we refunded the penalty. It's $300, and I think, in this particular case, I can say Sam is a very active business person. He's very ethical, he's on the planning commission, and he doesn't try to,
No, our experience with Stan has been very professional, been very gracious with us, so there's no debate in that.
so that would be my feeling. And then I think we should also take another hard look at that, so that Amber has got this. I was going to make sure you apply language.
Your thoughts about the $300?
I'm okay with it.
Without more than a motion.
I make a motion that we waive the fees of $300 for the web sellers and what's the other one?
Harvard Realty Farms, or good Harvard Realty.
What was that?
Good Harvard Realty.
The Harvard Vendors.
And members,
And for the reimbursement.
and I second that. All in favor, say aye. Aye.
Thank you.
Okay, so for $300, I'm not gonna take the floor, I will based on your recommendation. So we'll issue it.
Okay. Is this the, I mean, so I have a question moving forward. Is this the wrong place or is this?
Well, because the question is,
Okay.
ask the question, then we'll.
Yeah, no, I hear that. And again, and I told Patricia, to me, this is more on principle, than, and so I guess my, question is moving forward in terms of, some of these, tent permits. We just see a lot of nickel and diming in business for all of this stuff. Is there a way, and again, I don't know if this is the right place, to have, if you aren't changing your structure, I mean, for example, at Aurora, we have tents that have been the same for 8 years, and we pay the permit, they come out, and it's very inconsistent in regards to how it's being regulated. We're getting different answers from different inspectors, year in, year out, and we're paying money to comply with these things. It's incredibly frustrating from a business owner's perspective to be paying the permit fee and getting different answers. Even this morning, for example, the last 2 or 3 years, we had someone named Jim, I think, for our wedding tent, who came out and said, you need to have a fire extinguisher, which there's no walls inside the tent. Fine, we bought fire extinguishers. And he said it has to be in the tent. And so this is a wedding tent, no walls, mind you. And I said, when you're shooting pictures on a wedding, because he wanted the fire extinguisher at eye level, and you're around this tent, he wanted one that was at eye level. And I said, can we meet in the middle here? And can it be? It was like 2 yards. It was 2 yards off of the tent, mounted at eye level, and it said fire. He said, that's fine, that's reasonable. This morning, after our meeting, what's the gentleman's name?
Charlie.
Charlie?
Mm-hmm.
Charlie goes, there's no way that's gonna be allowed. It needs to be in the middle of the tent, which is where people are dancing and photos are occurring. I mean, it was a sign that said fire, and anyone in their right sense, can see that, from either side of the tent. Those are the kind of issues that I am seeing with, and then his thing was, well, it's right through the book, I had the authority to do this. Those are the kind of issues that I'm hoping that once we have something approved, can there be a process put in place where if there are issues or if anything changed, you need to let us know? Or does it have to be the same thing over and over again because we're getting different answers?
I mean, it should be 30, so.
Yeah, it should be the same. I'll talk to both of the inspectors, and going forward, we're gonna keep the same inspector each year, so that's gonna negate that right off the bat. If you have further questions on it, you can always talk to me here or the inspector, and if you want to take it further than that, I need to go to the appeals until today. Because it's code related, it can't come to the committee, it has to go to the board of appeals.
Yeah,
And
it-
it
it's
we
a code.
documented like an issue using that exact issue, that it was agreed to be put outside the fence, but clearly visible at eye level.
If
Can
an
that be
exception can be
documented?
made, it would be, but we're hearing the conversation this morning, it's not. I've got the copies of the code, if you guys want to look at this right now, for what's in there. I get what you're saying, Sam, but there's certain things that we can't give on. We're here for public safety, that's what the code is about.
That's a slippery slope I was talking about this morning, though. It's like, there has to be a place for some common sense. And that, like, the difference between it being mounted in the middle of the tent versus on the edge of the tent, it's a tent with open sidewalls. There's gotta be a space for, just some, like,
There's, the reason things are in the code is because something happened in the past, okay? So,
So I'm curious, what does the code say about the fire extinguisher?
2 blue dots, right there. These are the 2 areas that Charlie has written up for the tent there, currently.
Okay, mine is kind of blurry here, where it says
They shall be located.
What is, shall we put where?
Portable fire extinguishers shall be located in conspicuous locations where they will be readily accessible. So Charlie's looking at this, where he was at, and Charlie should be here to discuss this, because he
Well,
was
this is
talking about it. Okay, but where he saw it is at the opposite end of the tent, and it was not readily visible to him.
So I can see it is generic, there's no definition of where that should be.
Well, exactly, and that's the issue that I was bringing up earlier. It's like, the only reason that we had this meeting of Board of Appeals is because there's a catch-all phrase that he was referencing. Because clearly, in the temporary structures, mine didn't apply, but there was a catch-all phrase that leaves it to the inspector to make a judgment call.
I can tell you, I was at a wedding last Saturday in the tent, I won't say where, the fires, since we're not inside the tent. They're on outside.
I've never been to a wedding, and like, we go to a fair amount of weddings, and I've literally never been to one.
I can see them because they're big signs, at fire stations.
Right.
But they were
But
outside.
it's a slippery slope when you give the, like. and you-
Well, I think what your point is, if you got it approved 1 year and nothing changed, in theory, I'm not more specific, it should be approved the same unless the code is.
But that's not been our experience with the building department. It's been inconsistent. And, again, that's why honestly, to be quite frank, that's why I brought up this temporary structure thing is, it's not just this, it's inconsistency. And it leaves these building, like, there's always a reference back to the building code. And then there's some catch-all phrase, because we do this with planning commission too, where you put in these things. And so it leaves that authority.
Well, I believe you're in a time constraint, aren't you?
No,
Oh, I thought you had something to.
no, that's it.
This isn't part of our agenda, part of our next meeting, we probably should maybe get clarification on this. Because I mean, I can actually see your point. If you read this, it does not say where the fire extinguisher is.
Right, but there was that reference, and that you heard it this morning, was, it's right here in this book. And like, we see that in the planning commission too, it's like, yeah, well, there's a catch-all phrase that the ZBA has power to, based on some back part of this. So it gives the power to the ZBA because all governments.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to debate it, but I could argue both ways, because it has to be in a visible spot, and it has to be accessible and available.
And
That's
honestly-
pretty generic.
Well, and it has been, I mean, we mounted it right on the wall, and it's 2 yards outside of the tent, which is a wallless tent, where somebody can grab it. I mean, it's just that kind of like, it's right here in this book.
Consistency, consistency. I mean, if the first guy or guy number 2 hadn't told you put it outside, we wouldn't have this issue.
Well, we had this so I didn't have this conversation with the gentleman, because I asked, where do you want it? And he said it did. It needs to be in the tent. And I said, okay, if it is directly here, is that okay? And he said, yes, that's acceptable because it's visible. But now I'm being told differently.
And it is just, it's interpretation, application, and codes are like that, but it is on how they are interpreted and how they're implemented. And, you see that across the board. You said, Platinum ZBA, I see it with Lower Chapel, and it's always based on someone made a mistake at some point in time, one person somewhere, and it's entered into the code. But it's how you deal with those things and how people do it.
Oh, you
We
remember-
can have a different discussion about this, but thank you.
You remember Mr. Mikowski, Steve Mikowski, you know what I mean? He brought the code book, my ears could be off, but he brought a code book, and he actually physically has his code books.
Yes.
He brought them from the 60s, it was about this big, 70s was this big, 80s, 90s.
It's incredible.
Yeah.
And we see
And
it
it's also
across
because
all
it-
of our
And
businesses.
because of incidents.
Yeah, yes,
I mean, and that's again, it goes back to principle, we're seeing this across all of our businesses. This is a very specific example, it's something that can be, there are opportunities within the permitting, to, allow it to, be more user-friendly, which is the way I believe the government should exist. But it comes down to the building, authorities willingness and desire to be more consumer-facing.
And has been our goal, we try to work with contractors, that's where we change it. And overall, I think overall, we've done a great job. But I would just, if you look at these 2 points here, I think they're very generic. They're very vague.
So that's what's being, and just for that's what's being referenced as the.
I mean, I can see where 4 different inspectors could have 4 different interpretations of this. I went to one not long ago in the tent, and they had a fire extinguisher, because I kind of watched it. They were in the 4 corners, one in each corner. because for that reason, for photos. So obviously that must, and both of these were in Middle County, must have passed inspection.
Well, that doesn't necessarily mean did pass inspection, it can also be moved after we approve it.
It could be, but I can see your point. I mean, these are pretty, you could put a lot of different meanings in these two dots areas. These are not black and white ones, but it's two dots.
No, and I mean, that was my whole point with the temporary structure, that is black and white. But then there was a catch-all
Yeah.
phrase used, I mean, that, like, you can't get much more clear black and white, I had the dimensions and the occupancy. But that was, the reference was, you know, to yield authority back to the inspector.
And once again, unfortunately, there were health issues with people who downstate some places, fire, gas.
The changes are always to protect people and for health and safety.
It's just great, though.
That's the unit.
That's a topic for this.
I think it's this, and you've given us food for thoughts, and
Yep.
I'm happy that we are in agreement to reimburse.
So, thank you, again, to me, that was the
And thank you for
principle is
bringing-
why.
Yeah, thank you for being.
This is how government works. We have two different issues and we've got one.
Well, and, you know, you see it because you are working in local government as well as business, so you see it from a little bit different perspective and pick up on things that others might not.
Yeah.
And so this has been valuable, and.
We always have it.
Because we do want to be user-friendly.
I mean, that's, to me, that's the whole premise of, you know, why the government exists, is to help, you know,
Yes.
move things along. And as a building department head, there's always a choice to be made on how you view things as well, and how you're choosing to look. And that's really where a lot of this stems, is there's always a choice in regards to who you're trying to serve, and if, or if you're expecting people to serve you. And that's,
Hopefully common sense.
yep, so, thank
Thank
you.
you, Stan, so much, and we'll move on to the renewal things that we appreciate.
Yep.
Amber, is he trying for a retirement job, he wants to be the inspector?
Oh, yeah, that's all, yeah. That's my all time.
Thank you.
Yeah, I would be a wedding, I actually would be a wedding crasher. Good food, open bar, people are happy.
I thought you were going in for the food and dance.
Well, actually, when I was a kid, it was pretty common practice, it wasn't just us. We would go to weddings after the dinner when the music started. It was a pretty common experience. It was kind of accepted that people would know that people would show up, like friends or people that you knew, who weren't invited to the wedding. We never came for the meal. We might have helped ourselves with beverages, but the music would start and then people would just show up who were not invited to the
They
wedding.
still have weddings that you saw wedding.
You know, I was thinking, it used to be that everyone got married and had a reception at, at least when I was a kid, Cedar Town Hall, St. Rita's in Maple City, and VFW here, or next to Columbus. And I'm 22 there. I can't remember the last wedding I went to in the township hall, because everyone now has barn weddings or destination weddings right on the beach somewhere.
Before we leave the igloo fee thing, I'd like to put that on the agenda to kind of look at our piece. The 175, yeah, that's right. It probably is based on knowing how much it costs to have the inspector go out and assuming that other things factor. But if we can, our legal businesses, their businesses themselves, they don't have lots of money and they do lots of things for a lot of different things for different organizations. And if we can, you know, charge what we need, but give businesses a break. I think
Well, we should probably take another meeting before we adjourn.
Yeah, so we can post that. So, but thank you, Amber, for your work on this. I know a code like that takes a lot of time. And I know you were trying to do the best possible job enforcing the codes as they are. But I do think, you know, it is a sense point of it's how you interpret it is correct. And it's frustrating for you, and it's frustrating for others that are trying to.
But really, this is a great example you passed out. This is not black and white.
No.
It's very generic, consistent language. You can almost make a point that any place is visible, you can make a point that nothing is visible, depending on where you, point of view is.
I think we just continue trying to work towards, we're here to help businesses. which is what you've been trying to do, with the copying and the things and everything that your predecessor started, to try to make it a little more user-friendly. So it's nice. Okay, civil versus criminal.
Just came up several years ago. We are one of the few counties that does not have the ability to do civil fines for contract violations. It has to be criminal, and obviously, Joe Hall, the last thing he wants to do is prosecute criminal charges. So let's say there's a contractor that's completely ignoring standards, and inspectors, and let's say he's not getting a permit, or not following proper procedures, just ignores her. The only option Andrew really has is to go to the courts and file criminal charges against this person. I don't remember a case, there was a case at Sugarloaf at houses before you were here, before I was here. That was, I think it actually was its own issue also. But really the only recourse that Amber has is to go see the prosecutor and Joe take the case on, go through the courts and the law type process, and it's a criminal thing. And that's one of the things that's struggled with Sugarloaf, the previous owners. Like even before Jeff Katowski, it's owned by a corporation, so who do you go after? There's no names. So who does Joe buy? No. So we brought up to the board before, and our new council drafted up resolutions that Joe actually brought to the board 3 different times to allow the building official to give civil infractions, fines. So let's say you didn't get a permit for X project, and so forth. Amber would have the ability to actually give you a civil ticket, just as,
Would you do it, or would the inspectors carry it?
no,
No, it would be done
it'd be one.
You'd be like the prosecutor.
It got voted down on a 4-3 vote, and to be honest with you, it was because of the previous one, not all. There was concern, he was quite aggressive, and he liked the power and authority. And there's some legitimate concerns, which I agree with. Joe tried 3 different times. The sergeants are Sugarloaf that are hands are tied. You can't, how do you file criminal charges against a corporation that's very layer after layer after layer? Civil fines, at least, you would have to have a policy, yeah. So we brought it up again, and it's been 4 years when we used last time. Maybe 4 years. You remember this? Yeah. But it was a 4-3 vote every time, knocked it off. And like I said, we're one of the few counties that does not have a or the building officials not have a.
So you're asking whether we should try to bring that, yeah.
But they have no dialogue.
I think we
It's
should.
just a dialogue, because, I mean, with the way things are going, we're starting to see a couple instances, the process for someone without a permit is similar to the starting process here. They'll get a notice, they're getting 14 days. If they're found within 14 days, we find a path forward. If they don't, we try to find an avenue to contact them, to have a dialogue. If we can't, then the inspector goes out, goes to stop work order, they're given another 14 days. After that, it's kind of open-ended. In theory, it would go up to Joe. Some of these things are super minor, so we're almost looking for something that has teeth, but I really don't want to have to use it in a situation.
Well, a great example is the case in Northport that dragged on for years over the treehouse. That you don't think, you don't want to hear the whole story, it's been on for years, but it was a 20-year battle between the gentleman association and the township, and doing a treehouse / gazebo that he actually was living in. Went through the process, it went all the way through the state. We were,
Then beyond.
yeah, so the Supreme Court actually, it's just the Supreme Court. Really, his issue was with the township and not getting the right land use permit, but we got dragged into it, we had to get an attorney, we had to defend ourselves, or something that really wasn't our issue. If we would have had the ability to issue them civil fine, we would speed up the process.
And the general theory is too that you would pick this for extreme cases, like 0 communication period, post stop work order, still haven't heard anything, sent certified letters, and still haven't heard anything. The theory is that if you did it to one person who starts this, then word of mouth
but so fast, that they're kind of rein back.
Would this qualify for so?
No, there was a series of, and it had to be approved by, I believe, by the prosecutor also. So she would have the authority, but I believe, I got to bring it back up. I think there was going to be joint agreement with the prosecutor.
This is just a discussion, because I have no paperwork, I have no.
Yeah, I can bring it back. This was before Amber was involved.
Right, and Joe had something all drafted.
Yeah, our legal counsel drafted up the
Right,
form.
so we've got a starting point.
So I would suggest
Changed.
we pick the next meeting date to be, that meeting, I can bring the past resolutions forward. And we also look at the fees and talk about what you're concerned about having more consistency, more dialogues. Obviously, each case is different, but you want, so 4 inspections coming 4 different years should be, in theory, should be the same result, if nothing has changed. You want to pick a meeting date?
Yes,
You have
please.
the calendars, or? July.
I just work around everybody else's.
Which is just right around the corner.
I would say that.
I'm sorry.
We're only halfway to June. The June 15th.
Yeah, that's good.
Halfway in December.
All right, depends on how you're looking, right?
We need every single week and every single day and every week. Okay, so, what do you, the first week of the month is usually pretty good for me.
The week of the 4th.
Or Mondays or Fridays are good. So, oh, that's a holiday weekend,
Yeah.
sorry about that. Okay, so that Friday is, that Friday's good for me.
The 8th,
The 8th.
the 8th. Yeah. Andrew, that's how our vacation is. What time is good for you?
It's like 10 o'clock.
10 o'clock.
So we'll get those out. July 8th, and yeah,
We don't have any other meetings before it on Friday.
so far.
No,
So far.
I try to keep Fridays for calls and work to the extent I can.
We'll go with that.
So, okay, so, 10 o'clock? That's it, I'm done with your thing, thank you.
I'm going to say, good for you.
Yeah, I just read it, yeah.
Civil versus.
We're going to talk about, potential vehicle purchases for you.
Oh, yeah.
I asked that only because it's budget week,
Yes,
and I
thank you.
want to potentially put that in the budget.
So you have several vehicles that you're going to.
Yeah, I got 2 new Rangers this year,
Yeah.
but we had talked about last year, doing some kind of rotation so that I could phase out these other 2, and then I could have service. Is this the time to think about replacing the other 2, or should there be a further gap here?
Well, let's let it jump to 200.
Okay, well, and 200 for your budget.
But you can put it in the budget, because right, I'm just put it. in the
Just put
budget.
what I did last year and
Yes,
discuss it.
yeah, and we got time.
Yes.
Who did we get last time? Did we get you?
For
Who did we get the pickup truck for?
Jerry,
Jerry.
we're still waiting for that to come.
No,
I got 2 Rangers.
That's right, okay, you did.
Oh, for the second.
Yeah.
And then,
They did come, they came on Monday. So we're just waiting on our signs for the sizing of the.
okay, that's not it. Jerry's truck, they call us in April, so it'll be in 2 weeks. It's what, June 15th, we're still waiting. But they call us, hey, truck will be here in 2 weeks. So,
What about the one for the sheriff?
they got all of
Did they get that pickup?
the one that they ordered, I don't know. Yeah, for that,
TNT,
yeah.
whatever.
I don't think that came yet, but that they have some time because the state could use that, whatever they, that wasn't in the meeting for the undercover.
Yeah.
So just put it in your budget.
I'll just put it to discuss about it, because I don't have a number, I want to reach out to anybody, and it's not like it could be till next year either, I just was looking for blocks out. Well, and it's just like rotations, so you're not doing it all at once. Yes. Makes sense, makes sense. And let's add to it the application for willful fine.
Oh, the after the fact fee.
Just to get it.
We have the equal for pre-COVID or that? Yeah.
Yeah, we've been working on it for 4 years, Outlaws.
They were probably the first, but.
Yeah. That's where the majority of our concerns stem from too. They're a much larger operation, they're doing
They,
a lot of other things there too.
state got involved in that. The almost lost it. They're not out to.
They've got a lot of tents too.
And then they've got some other expansion plans, and we've got the property next door for the doctor's office, and that includes facilities. And then we got a lot of parking for
They're doing well.
Yeah, they're doing.
I was gonna say, they should turn it into a parking
A lot of
lot.
people just said that. A lot of people just
You
can't.
That's why I never know that, walk on the street.
It's so popular, no one goes there.
Yeah.
So you'll be there and say, it's so popular, no one goes there.
He has some great sayings. He says, you know, when you reach a fork in the road, take it.
But, you know, having something claimed in 100%.
Oh,
I mean, a fork on the road, there really is a reason, it's based on where you live. There truly was a fork to get this house, you took where the highway was, and became a fork. But they both circle around to the end, so no matter what fork you take,
You end up.
you got this house, so actually there was a reason.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, no one, yeah, I read some article, I'm a baseball fan, you know. And you know, what he actually said, what they did say. But he got so many credits for all these things, well, it must be overground. But some actually had merit, like the fork in the road. You get the fork,
Take it.
it doesn't matter, you want to buy my house, no matter which way.
And technically, we should say, are there any other items for discussion? And any board member comments?
Welcome aboard,
In public? Yes,
Got
go.
more fun than they do.
Rick. Yeah.
Well, then I just need a motion to adjourn.
Make a motion to adjourn.
Second?
Congratulations on the chairmanship.
Oh, yeah, thank you. And now I've got two chairmanship, I tried to